Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to my channel Kalanati. Today's video is an overview of a young adult fantasy trilogy by Ursula K. Guin called The Annals of the Western Shore. I think this is one of Le Guin's lesser known series. When you think young adult and fantasy and Le Guin, you automatically think of the Earthsea series, and I don't think that this series has gotten that much attention, so I wanted to do an overview of the entire thing now that I have read them all in one week. These books are Gifts from 2004, Voices from 2006, and Powers from 2007, which went on to win the Nebula Award for Best Novel. First off, I think you can read the series in any order that you pick the books up in, and I didn't realize that when I started reading them. While they are technically in a chronological order, the connections between them are relatively tenuous. I think if you follow them in chronological order, you see the buildup of connections, but if you read it in reverse order, for example, it would be a completely different experience and not a bad one. All three books take place in the same universe, but they are in different cities at different times and they have different main characters. This is set in a relatively standard fantasy secondary universe with a small magical element. This magical element is mostly in the title of gifts. There are families in this world who have a magical power that runs in their lineage, and that is mostly what this first book is about. It's set in the uplands and it follows Auric, a teenage boy, as he comes into, or thinks he's coming into, the magical ability that runs in his family. The gift that runs in his family is called the Unmaking, which is just as terrifying as you might imagine it is, and he thinks his gift is wild, so his father and he decide to blindfold him so that he can't look at people and accidentally kill them. How he reacts to his gift and using it or not using it upsets the balance of feuds and rivalries between all the families in the uplands who have gifts. Essentially, I think that this book is about teenagers, Auric and then the teenage girl that he grows up with, coming into their powers and having to take responsibility for them and asking some questions about the actual nature of their gifts and why they have them in the first place. This book also tentatively brings in the theme of literacy and poetry and the power of words to bring about liberty. Voices takes place 17 years later in the city of Ansul, and it follows a teenage girl named Memmer. At the time of Memmer's birth, the city had been conquered by these barbarians from the desert who believe that the written word is evil incarnate. They have destroyed all the books, they have banned reading and writing, which is terrible for Ansul because this city was once a renowned seat of learning, education, literacy, and they have a very famous library that was ransacked and destroyed. Memmer belongs to one of the prominent families of the city. A relative, perhaps an uncle, is called the Waylord, and Memmer is heir to the great secret that the Galva family and the Waylord guard. The final book, Powers, probably takes place right after the events of Voices, though it also, like the others, is set in a different part of the world and it follows a different protagonist. It starts in the city of Etra, where a young boy named Gavir and his sister Salo are slaves, and it follows Gavir as he escapes from slavery after the horrific death of his sister and goes looking for his family and his roots and something more in his life. Powers quickly makes the overall theme of this series very clear because it is an exploration of what slavery does to people, especially what it does to children who know nothing else, who have grown up as slaves, and it asks questions about the trust or that tacit agreement between master and slave and how easily, quickly, and devastatingly that trust can be betrayed. So what did I think of these books? By far, my least favorite is Gifts. This is the shortest, simplest, and youngest feeling out of all three books, and it has left me unaffected and unmoved both times that I've read it. I read it when it first came out when I was a teenager. I actually remembered quite a bit of the story when I reread it, and both times I have come away with not much. It's an enjoyable story. It does a great job of establishing the backgrounds, the childhoods of Auric and Guin, so you know them when they reappear in the next 2 books. But other than that, I don't have much to say about it. It felt like a pretty standard coming-of-age fantasy story. Plot-wise and thematically, my favorite book is Voices, and it's no surprise that this is very similar to The Telling by Guin. I mean, the similarities here, they both take place in a culture or a society that has been oppressed, that has been forced to give up their rights, rituals, beliefs, their knowledge, education, history, their books, their libraries, and they want to regain these things. In The Telling, the people have kind of done it to themselves. But in this one, you have a city that's literally been conquered by another people, another culture, who's then banned all their stuff. But I loved this theme of wanting to recover the lost works, of seeing libraries and books as precious stores of knowledge, and that terrifying possibility of being censored. Honestly, I think I enjoyed Voices so much because it was a balance of difficult subject matter and things happening that I wanted to happen that made the story more positive overall. I don't want to go into details about that too much because it could be spoilery for the end of this and also potentially for the end of The Telling, but I think that the actions that the characters, Memmer, and the people of the city take gave me what I wanted by the end of this story. And to be really honest, the subject matter in this, even the bits about enslavement and then banning books and censorship and everything and the way that women are treated, was far easier for me to get through than those same issues taken to the next degree in Powers. Powers was very difficult for me to read. It's been a really long time since I read a book about slavery, on the inside of slavery. In fact, I don't think I've read a book with this topic since I was a child. So this is absolutely one of those topics that I avoid reading about because I find it so deeply troubling, and it is even more difficult for me now as an adult because the implications of slavery for women and women's bodies and how women are treated is, I understand that far more than I did when I was a child, and that was what was getting to me so much in this book. I don't think it is any surprise that the main character of this is actually a man, even though a lot of the attention of the book is trying to point you towards how women live, how women behave, and what freedom means for women. Because it's really clear that wherever Gav goes, when women are enslaved, things happen differently for them than for men, but even when they have escaped slavery or when they are supposed to be free, they are still not free. They are still seen as the possessions, the property to be given or taken by men. And Gav very slowly starts to see this, and his shame at not seeing it for what it is when he was a slave and then when he is free is interesting to read about. It's a young man's perspective from the inside of slavery, of not seeing what happens to women until it devastates his own family, basically. I think a simple but very important thing that this book said to me was that it's not a story about justice. This can't be a story about Gavir getting justice or revenge for what happened to him and his sister, because fundamentally that is impossible. There's a line in here which I tabbed that says, justice is impossible in a society founded on injustice, in this case slavery, because the state of slavery is so unjust and there's been this huge betrayal there. There is nothing to be done about this. You can't make it right. Out of this entire series, I think that Powers is the most accomplished book and perhaps the one most worth reading because of what it's trying to say, but I cannot count it as like my personal favorite because it's hard to say that I enjoy reading about some of these things. I do think that there is this slow building of the topic of slavery throughout the series. In the first book, you have serfs in a very poor part of the land. Then you have a people enslaved, but not exactly slaves, in the city of Ansul. And then you have overt, clear, obvious, institutionalized slavery in this book. You can see where it's going throughout the series. So this is one argument, I think, for reading the series in order, seeing the buildup of the themes and what it's aiming for. However, I do think that if you read the books out of order, the individual impact of each story would still be there. So that's the Annals of the Western Shore series. While I did say this was a young adult fantasy series, I do think that Voices and Powers could very readily be read by an adult audience. I think that they are marketed as a whole towards the young adult demographic when they don't necessarily need to be. This is an underrated series. I think the first book is kind of weak, but books 2 and 3 definitely take this to the level I expect from Le Guin. They are all beautifully written and tackle the issues of belief in literacy, the power of stories, freedom, and politics that Le Guin is known for talking about in her signature style. Thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.